Hi there, I'm Rashonda. I'm the creator of this YouTube channel as well as the artbyro.com website where you can find over 200 art and drawing tutorials. Today we're going to be drawing a graffiti letter G, and I'm doing mine on artist trading cards, which if you're not familiar with those, check out the description box. There's a link in there to our freebie, which is just a nice little guide to get you started on artist trading cards and explain what they are. But I love doing my practice drawings, especially my little graffiti practice on those artist trading cards. So go ahead and check that out. And don't forget to check out the website. Again, that's artbyro.com. And we can go ahead and go on over to the studio and get started on the tutorial. Today I'm going to be drawing a graffiti letter G. And I'm doing mine on an artist trading card. This is a piece of cardstock cut down to the artist trading card size. If you're not familiar with artist trading cards, or also called ATCs, check out the description box. There's a link in there to a free guide that will explain all about artist trading cards and their benefits. But you can use any type of paper. You can do a sketchbook, just some scratch paper, whatever you're using. That doesn't really matter. But today I'm going to be doing this graffiti letter G. And of course there's many different styles and ways that you can draw your graffiti letters. But I'm going to show you the system that I use that makes it really easy. So what I do is start with some basic guidelines for the overall size, shape that I want my letter to be. So basically you would draw it like you would if you were just writing out the letter, but because we're doing it more stylized, we want to include those elements in here so we can kind of see what it's going to look like. And remember, we're going to make it bigger, so don't do it the overall size you want it to be. But just to kind of we want to make sure we get the angles, the basic angles right, and the size of everything. So at this stage, we can make any of the adjustments or corrections that we need to make just by doing these quick, easy line, just the line part of it. And then we're going to build out our letter from there. And you can kind of work through how you want the different pieces to come down, and we can adjust as we go, but it just gives us a little something to get started with so that we're not just trying to draw it from nothing. A lot of people have a hard time just getting started with their artwork because they just sort of freeze up. They get intimidated looking at the blank page, which they refer to that as the blank page syndrome. Writers have that same kind of paralysis, if you want to call it that. That seems a little extreme, but just that nervousness of getting started with those first marks on the paper. So now what I want to do is start fleshing this out a little bit, deciding where things are going to overlap, where they're not going to overlap, how the angles are going to go, what's going to be curved, what's going to be straight. So anything in art, whether it's drawing graffiti letters or drawing an image of something, is really just a series of decisions that you need to make. And one of the decisions with your graffiti art or your graffiti lettering is where do you want things to curve and where do you want them to be straight. So I want this to curve around, come down here. We can make these little extra bits, but we can do those later. So you could just draw just kind of a boring, not boring, because graffiti in itself is more stylized, which makes it more interesting anyway, but just start with some basic basic shapes of the lettering, and then we can add some extra things to it as we go. So now here, I want this to come down. And we're going to erase some of these lines. We're drawing a little bit extra pieces on here. Only because we're going to change it up a little bit. I want that to be a little bit wider. We'll have this come down and overlap that piece. This come up here, angle down that way. I'm kind of cleaning this up a little bit as I go so it's easier to see. Normally I would just leave all of that, but I want you to be able to follow what I'm doing. This line's not going to be here. That's called drawing through, when you draw a line that you know you're not going to keep, but so that everything is connected, and then we just erase that afterwards. So that's going to curve around that way. That's going to come up there. So now we can add, if we want to add some extra little pieces to it outside of our readable letter. Now sometimes you might not want your letters to be as readable. I don't really care for that type of style, like the wild style type drawings. That's not really my thing, I guess. But you can abstract your letters as much as you want. You could add extra stuff. You could make it a little less legible if that's the look you're going for. Like with any kind of art, it's up to you what you want to do. That's the fun thing about art, is you get to put your own little personality into it. So I think that's about it for the letter itself. I like how that looks. I don't want to add anything more. You may want to add more to it. Of course, that's up to you. But I'm going to call this letter portion of it done, and then now we need to outline. So since I use markers most of the time with my artwork, I like to outline in black, and I'll typically use these Sharpie pens. Even with something like the graffiti lettering, which you might want to have a nice bold outline on it, and you could use something like these fine point markers. What I don't like about the markers is they leave a little bit of a fuzzy edge, and this pen will leave a nice crisp edge. It doesn't soak into the paper like the marker does. But if I want to get a thick, heavier outline, I have to go over it 2 or 3 times. Which for me, that doesn't bother me. If that sounds like a terrible experience for you and you don't want to have to go over your outline multiple times, then you might just want to use just a regular marker. Or if you don't have a pen like this, then you can use something else. And of course, it doesn't have to be outlined in black. That's just the look that I like. You could do it in a different color. You could do something that goes along with whatever your color scheme's going to be for your lettering. A lot of times I don't make those decisions until later on. I kind of decide as I go what I'm going to do. Sometimes I know ahead of time. Like if I'm doing a full graffiti art piece, I'll often do thumbnail sketches and just figure everything out ahead of time. But if I'm doing something like this, I pretty much decide as I go along. I don't know what I'm doing ahead of time. And what I like to do is I'll use the artist trading cards and I'll do some practice drawings basically, or just experimenting with different backgrounds or different lettering style. And the artist trading cards work really well for that because they're really a wonderful time saver. It gives you an opportunity to experiment, play around. You know, if you're doing a full page piece of art, you're not going to want to experiment too much because of the risk of something not turning out the way you pictured it in your mind. So with the artist trading cards, because they're a lot quicker, I find that I'm more willing to try different things and experiment a little bit. But they're also a good way to practice. So sometimes I'll make these cards and give them to people and just do either a letter from their first name or a letter from their last name, you know, one of their initials. And I'll do that, put a background on it, put some nice colors in it, maybe something that I think might fit with their personality a little bit, and then I'll give the card to them. People like getting little gifts like that, especially when they're personalized. Now when you do your outline, you can keep the line weight consistent, or you can vary it, make some of the areas thicker and some of them thinner. Again, that's just part of the decision-making process. So I'm just gonna finish this up a little bit, make sure my lines are fairly smooth. And then the next thing that I do is, let me put this where you can see all of it. The next thing that I do is use a block eraser and erase all these pencil lines. Now you do want to make sure you let it dry enough that it's not going to smear. If I wasn't recording this, I'd probably let it dry a little bit longer. It doesn't take too long, but if you do it too quick, you'll smear the pen. So that's it for the letter itself. I'm going to grab me some markers and I will be back to add some color to this. When I choose my markers, what I'll typically do is use these scrap paper that's leftover, cardstock. It's left over from when I cut out my artist trading cards. I have all these little pieces left. So what I do is test out the colors on this so I can see if they're going to blend. And then I can use those. I know which markers I want to use. So for all of my artwork, I'll typically use 2 or 3 different markers. So I'm using this kind of a bluish gray color. So I have one, I can show you on here real quick. I have one that's darker, and I have that one, this one's lighter and this one's a little bit darker. And then if I use the lighter one, I can blend them together. So I can kind of fade the colors out so that they go light and dark. And you can do this with any type of alcohol-based marker. And then, so what I want to do is fade it so part of it's light and part of it's dark. So I'm going to have this part up here, I want to be lighter, and then at the bottom it's going to be darker. So I'm literally just gonna fill all this in. And with these alcohol markers, as you go over top of the same color, so if I'm using the same marker, every time I go back over that, it's going to darken it up a little bit. So you do want to keep that in mind. If you layer it, it will change how dark it looks on your paper. And then you need to decide how far down you want it to go, where you want it to transition from the lighter color to the darker color. And then just do the same thing down there. And I'll usually try to go the same direction for the most part, other than just getting up around that edge. And then where the two come together, we can overlap them a little bit. And then use the lighter color to blend that together right there. Now you can also use what's called a colorless blender. You can use that to blend the colors together. I find it's easier to just use the marker that I already have laying here instead of having more markers laying around. And then as I go over top of this, I don't want this to be lighter down here, so I need to go all the way down with that. Make sure I got the coverage that I want. And you also, when you're blending these, you need to make sure you're working while the markers are still wet. Once that evaporates, they won't blend the same way. So that's it for the letter itself. The only other thing would be if you want to add any designs in there, or I will, after this dries, I'll use this white jelly roll pen and I'll add some white over top of that, put some highlights on there. So now the next thing would be to add some kind of a background. Either just some colors or some kind of designs. You could do brick walls, you could do some images back there. There's a lot of different ways you could do your backgrounds. So that's another decision that has to be made, is what kind of a background. We could put some like paint dripping down. We could put some like the spray paint, like the little clouds of spray paint going around it. We could put a brick wall back there. A lot of different things we can do. So again, it's just another decision that needs to be made. So I'm going to go ahead and do a background, and I'll do that a time lapse. I'm going to speed that up while I do that, and then I will be back when all of this is finished. see, I got my background finished up. And as I discussed earlier, the last thing I want to do is add some white highlights to the letter. And now that this is all dry and the alcohol has evaporated out of the marker, I can go ahead and do that. So of course the white is going to show up a little bit better on the darker colors than on the lighter. It's going to blend in a little bit more. And I'm just picking a few areas to add a little bit of white. It's a little bit hard to see on this lighter area. And of course, there's different ways that you can add the white on there. But I usually like to finish up most of my drawings by breaking up those solid colors with a little bit of white. Just a personal preference that I have. So that's it for the graffiti letter G. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Happy creating! That's it for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll join us next time. If you did enjoy the video, please give us a like. It helps us grow. And also subscribe if you want to get notified of future videos. And don't forget to check out that description box. There's some links in there that you might find useful. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!